Hi, my name is Netta Jenkins.
Hi, I'm Jacinta Mathis, and we are the co-founders of Dipper.
Dipper is a technology platform that guides professionals of color to a better workplace, one review at a time.
Dipper is your safe space. It is the time for you to share your voice with a community that you are a part of. Visit us and join today at ourdipper.com.
Welcome to the virtual launch of ourdipper.com. You requested that we continue these events, so we have added to our lineup every Tuesday until the end of this month to participate in our Shut Up and Listen themed events. Each event will feature top DEI thought leaders to discuss engaging topics impacting workplace culture. Now, this is a perfect opportunity to share more about Dipper, a tech platform for all people of color, Black, Brown, Asian, and Indigenous professionals of all levels, including C-suite, to rate and review their workplaces. Members have profiles and can access the inside scoop on which companies to join and stay away from. Members can also engage with other members on Dipper's newsfeed. So today, our topic is, are you all ready? Why saying all lives matter is problematic. So let me start by introducing our guests, LinkedIn influencers, Yolanda Renee and John Graham. I'll start off with Yolanda, and Jacinta will introduce John. So Yolanda is an energetic and savvy professional with 20 plus years in multicultural marketing, DEI, and corporate events for global brands, magazine publishers, ad agencies, and healthcare organizations. Now, whether it's managing strategic partnerships, consumer product, or technical enterprise launches, she is always keeping the Black consumer and end user top of mind. She brings bold leadership in employee resource group initiatives and uses her strong voice to advocate for the disenfranchised. She is a change maker, helping to reimagine corporate for Black employees and other marginalized groups by speaking and writing about these lived experiences. Welcome, Yolanda. It's a pleasure to have you. On to you,
so much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Netta. And yes, I mirror that sentiment. We're so glad to have you, Yolanda. And I'm also really excited to introduce John Graham. John is a keynote speaker, coach, and executive consultant. He engages global audiences on topics ranging from diversity, inclusion, and belonging, the power of personal branding, and employer brand activation through cultural marketing strategies. He also recently authored, as in of Juneteenth, it released. So this is some new stuff for you. New fire coming to you straight from Dipper. John released The Plantation Theory, the Black professional struggle between freedom and security. And head over to your local bookstore, to Amazon. John will tell us more about where we can find it, but it showcases the realities that countless Black corporate professionals face despite the best efforts to prove their worthiness of an opportunity. So thank you so much, both of you, for coming out. Thank you to all of our followers and people viewing. So let's get started. Can both of you kind of share a bit about what sparked your desire to pursue a career in culture marketing and kind of prioritizing the stories of people that looked like you, and also just diving in deeper with those communities?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I'll kick us off. So I consider my career, it wasn't one like I wanted to be a doctor and knew that at an early age. I feel like my career chose me. I was in undergrad, paying my way through, was my second year, and I was working part-time. So I went to the Job Career Development Center. There was a posting for an ad agency. When I read the job description, it talked about, reaching out. It was targeted marketing at that time. Applied for the job, got it. The rest is history. I went on from that ad agency, which is based in Chicago, Burrell, to Johnson Publishing, working on Ebony Magazine, and then to a global brand working on ending my career for 10 years doing diversity marketing. And so, but it was at the ad agency, and I just want to read this article that I dug up. It's dated April 1990. And in this article, this is what made me decide to go with this career. It says, by 2020, the number of US residents who are Hispanic or non-white will have more than doubled. It goes on to say, I'm going to leave that year out because I'm going to let the audience do their research. By this year, it's coming up, U.S. residents, as defined by the Census Bureau, will trace his or her descent to Africa, Asia, the Hispanic world, the Pacific Islands, Arabia, almost everywhere but white Europe. Let that set. And so that's what chose me. And that has had me stuck from those many years ago to today, fighting for Black consumers and marginalized.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So John, what sparked your fire there?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it goes back to undergrad as well, where I'm a double alumnus of the oldest degree granting HBCU in the country, the Lincoln University, PA. And I went in as a comp science major, coming from the Bay Area, thinking I'm going to do something in computers and technology. But we had a mandatory class called the African American Experience. And it was the first time for me, coming from predominantly white suburban schools, hearing the contributions of Africans pre-transatlantic slave trade, understanding that there was commerce and travel and engagement between African kingdoms and the Americas and Europe and all of these things well before European discovery. And so that sparked an interest in me, so much so that I changed my major that first semester into my second semester. And so I vividly remember coming home and telling my parents that I had done this and changed my major to African studies. And they looked at me crazy across the table like, that's not going to make any money. And so now, fast forward, I joke and I'm saying, you still think it's not going to make any money? Yeah. Looks like I played the long game here, but no, for me, that was it, right? And so everything that I did as a graduate going into corporate spaces, I sought to infuse culture into the work that I did. And so when it comes to employer brand, recruitment marketing, and the approach that I took, which was putting the human-centered story up front so as to showcase corporate culture and then to attract talent, I recognized that we had stories that weren't being told. We had a perspective that wasn't being showcased unless it was to, tokenize a career site or to be the front of a campaign to provide the illusion of diversity. And so at some point I understood that, if I'm going to play a part in this and I'm bringing our culture to the forefront for these companies to look diverse, the marketing has to match reality, right? And so I wanted to make sure that, that the work that I do now going forward as Vice President of Employer Brand Diversity and Culture, Shaker Recruitment Marketing, is to tell the lived experience of marginalized folks, help clients and help companies understand that lived experience through some very unique and cutting edge survey tools and understanding how we can close those culture gaps for Black and other marginalized groups of talent.
Wow. Thank you so much both of you, for the work that you're doing. Incredible work. I'm excited to dive in a little deeper into this conversation. I know our viewers are really excited as well. We have been hearing the term for a while, all lives matter, right? And for some folks, that's really triggering. That's really, really triggering. And so I would love to dive into, why is the rhetoric of all lives matter harmful to white, brown, and Black communities? I'd love to hear from both of you.
Sure. So I'll kick it off again, if you don't mind, John, because
I
brought tons of receipts.
Ladies first.
I brought tons of DEI receipts. And we're gonna go there today. John, be nice. So
Go hard.
It is problematic is, number one, the statement is actually true. How about that?
Yep.
But What I also want you to realize is that all lives matters, Black lives matters, but that statement was originally Black Lives Matters, created by the organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was a rallying cry of sorts to the Black community at the death of one of our own, Trayvon Martin. And it was a call for justice, for liberation, and demands to stop killing us. So when someone outside of that community, and let me take a step back further, it's like a call and response. And for many of us in the Black community, that is an African culture. Call and response is a singing its way for us to communicate.
Amen.
Country, yeah, in discussion of civic affairs and spiritual and religious rituals. So when those three amazing founders of Black Lives Matters, Alicia Garza, Patrice, and Opal, they were speaking to our community about something that was very triggering and that was it's been happening down through the centuries. So when someone outside of our community says all life matters, it's really a backhanded statement. It's designed to distract, to deter, and to derail the purpose of the original call, which was to us ancestrally. And so Patrice, Alicia, and Opal, they really weren't talking to you, for those that say that. They were talking to our community first. That's their primary call. And then it was a response for our community to take to the streets, to speak out, to talk to their family members, their political figures, to say, stop killing us. That's what that was about. And so it was nothing different than what Dr. King did with his nonviolent protest. It was also what other leaders like Malcolm X did, the Tulu Nine did, the Black Panthers. These were calls down through our generations to say what was affecting us, and it had to stop. From the inhumane treatment, the unjust treatment, and instead of saying all lives matters, you should say, you're right. This needs to stop. This is inhumane. And as a country, we must change. I'll stop there, John.
Woo. Yolanda, you came through prepared with a capital P, and you came through not playing any games with a capital G on the games. You came here to definitely educate, and thank you for that education. I think that's so powerful and well said, because that is a term that people like to use. Well, all lives matter, right? And what does that mean? John, I'd love to hear from you. What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's the reason it's problematic is the essence of the response itself, right? First of all, Black Lives Matter didn't need a response nor a retort. So all lives matter was this this rallying cry for white folks and for non-Black folks to include themselves in a conversation that ultimately wasn't centered on them, to Yolanda's point. But I also like to give the example for people who have said this, and I had to coach a manager of mine on this, a white woman who said that, in a level of naivete that I couldn't let it slide. And I gave her the burning building analogy, right? Or the burning house analogy. I said, imagine you have a home that's on fire in your neighborhood, and the fire brigade comes and starts spraying water on all of the houses around it. Now, of course, every house in the community matters, but there's one that's on fire right now. Right. So what we need to acknowledge is the urgency in which our group of people in this country are being, exterminated, right? Yeah, and so to use that statement as a retort was you could see the insecurities triggered, right? Again, we're in a system that was designed to keep the dominant culture's dominance hidden from plain view, especially to that group of people. And so Black Lives Matter is a thrust of reality, and it breaks the cognitive dissonance by centering Blackness, which then forces white folks to recognize their whiteness.
And that's a hard part, right? You talk a little bit about how you've had to kind of coach people through and walk people through that. In that specific example, how have people responded to that? For that manager that you were working with, And what was that like for you? Yeah, especially in the workplace.
Well, you you see this
So,
moment
yeah,
of aha, right? But
right.
then what kicks in is this an embarrassment, right? For
Yeah,
those who think critically or consciously about a different perspective that sheds light on theirs. But then there's also consequences, right? For
yeah,
bringing this to somebody's purview, and then them wanting to protect or cover their insecurities, and then
yeah,
and then take action so as not to be put on blast.
yeah,
So
yeah.
our need to bring these things to awareness and attention does come at a cost, unfortunately, in these spaces.
Yep, yep. How
It
do
does.
you, and I'm so sorry, I have one more question, but how do you ensure that that person feels safe while they share that with you, or you explain that, how do you
Mm-hmm.
ensure that they feel safe in doing that?
If I can take that, and it's
Yolanda?
kind of a piggyback on off of what John mentioned about the burning house.
Yeah.
I try to use examples. So another example, because that house is a popular one, let's go with something more recent. And because I'm in a healthcare space right now, it's almost like saying with what we've come out with COVID-19, for someone to say, well, why should we take the COVID-19 vaccine? What about the flu vaccine? It's ludicrous. We know why. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Well, I submit to you today that the Black community has been in a pre-pandemic before there was COVID-19. And right now, we're, even for us, and that's one of the issues why we're seeing a fall off with the Black community not taking the vaccine. We've been suffering so long. Most people feel
Mm-hmm.
like things could happen to them on the way to work, or they can be impacted by a run-in with the police, or our Karen in our community, that can impact our lives probably before something happens with COVID.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to share that impact. So that's another example. So I try to share real life examples with my coworkers and with my community as it relates to why all lives matters is not relevant. So that's just another example.
Yeah. No,
No,
thank you for that.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's a great tip, because I think a lot of the real everyday things also impact how we think something can really make a change in our everyday in the future. And I think, with the concept of Sankofa and looking back so we can move forward, I wonder how you have really seen our history influence the workplace dynamics. And, we're seeing this happen as we talk about and see things like the Tulsa massacre, that conversation happening in the workplace, or the recognition of Juneteenth, but not a call for reparations.
Mhm.
So how are we, how have both of you, feel free to speak, how have we seen
Yeah.
our history influence workplace dynamics with marginalized communities today?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I think 2020 presented an unprecedented platform for Black stories to come to light. Uh, you saw courageous conversations, focus groups, uncomfortable conversations, book clubs, fireside chats, whatever you can think of, where Black folks in corporate spaces were telling their stories for the first times out loud in mixed company. It brought a new level of, I think, awareness to executive leadership, predominantly white audiences, in ways that they hadn't had before. But what I recognized in that moment was there was this need to focus on what and then how, right? So what is going on now, and then how do we fix it? But nobody wanted to look at why. And so as we talk about history, um, if you were educated in American school systems, your history education is severely deficient, right? Because you aren't getting an expansive perspective of world history, let alone American history. And you see this going on right now with the denial of the 1619 Project, critical race theory being banned by K through 12 elementary school systems, let alone higher education. And you have to start asking the question, why would that be? Well, if you start to look at history and get a foundational understanding of why our modern day reality is what it is, then again, that breaking cognitive dissonance, this notion that the dominant culture has some culpability and accountability historically and present day that they don't want to acknowledge. And in fact, there was a system constructed around them so they would never have to.
And
Yeah.
I will add to that, because they don't want to talk about it. And you talk about the impacts on the workplace. I realize that the Black community is being impacted in such a way that it automatically spills over into the workforce, always has. I don't take my Black community hat off or my Black mother hat off when I come into work as a Black employee. They all go on top of each other. So what we've seen, I know you may have seen a recent article from the Wall Street Journal that talked about 40% of the workplace is considering quitting post-COVID. And that's being called the Great Resignation or the Big Shift. I'm calling it the mass exodus, because for Black employees, it's really not about the fallout about taking the vaccine or not, or working from home or not. It has been a systemic, long-term effect on Black employees' lives in the workplace. And I'm sure John's book is going to talk about it. I haven't read it yet. My copy's coming. But there is a real fallout.
Yeah.
And the workforce is really speaking back, just like the streets are speaking back about the violence. It is not going to be business as usual. And if it means that the chips have to fall where they may in terms of your income and your quality of life, I think that Year Off has shown a lot of Black people, I'm actually a little bit healthier. I'm a little bit happier. I can homeschool my kids and not have to deal with the racism that happens to my child in the school and all the work that comes on with work and what happens to me in the workplace is a compounded effect. And I think for many people, they're reassessing that. And so it's going to have a huge impact on what we see the workforce looking like today and into the future.
Yeah. What would you all like to see happen by next year, right? Just short term, right? Because both of you pointed out that after the murder of George Floyd, we saw this influx of all companies and just everyone, right? Holding different various sessions and wanting Black people specifically to open up and talk about the experiences, but Black people are still seeing that they're not changes. The root issue is not being dealt with. Just from a short-term goal, what would you all like to see happen by next year? Or what do you think is even realistic?
I think the work that we're trying to push forward is advanced DEI to go beyond just compliance-based activities, right? And performative activities. And what I mean by that is DEI historically is a 57-year-old institution, right? Post 1964 Civil Rights Act, and has become an $8 billion consulting industry, but yet it's not produced a result that any Black person can tangibly call out in corporate spaces. And so the reason being is because the intended beneficiaries of that work have always been the company, not necessarily the marginalized groups that it's supposed to be helping. So what we're pushing forward is a lived experience-based approach to really deconstruct and analyze what are those daily slights, those dismissive behaviors, those toxic culture behaviors at the mid-management and executive leadership levels that create cultures of inequity and ultimately, drive up attrition rates for Black folks. To Yolanda's point, that mass exodus is real, not only because they're questioning, do I want to go back into these environments, but also they're recognizing, damn, I'm the sauce anyway. I should be focusing on my own ventures, right? Yeah. And now they've had space and freedom to actually start building on those. And so if we truly understand through data-backed approaches what that lived experience is for marginalized folks, then we can start to apply DEI strategies that help to close those culture gaps and really make meaningful, substantial changes for the people who need the most help.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yolanda, what are your thoughts on that point?
My thoughts are that Black employees have told you enough. We've been telling you in exit surveys, We have been telling you in our one-on-ones and our 365 reviews, you have data upon data. I say listen to and read what's in the data and then take action. Black employees and other marginalized groups are looking for action. They want you to change. Just because the holiday was announced Juneteenth this year, a lot of companies promised it last year. I would love to see the hands of the employees that actually got that did it manifest for them. I'm willing to believe that most of them did not. So walk the walk, talk the talk, but look at the data. And then the second thing is, don't always just rely on the Black story. The All Lives Matter, the community, the other side of the community that have been the perpetrators of the trauma of all of this, I'm waiting to hear those stories. I've had a few really, really transparent colleagues to share. Oh yeah, I've grown up in a family such as this and this and this. When the other side of that equation and those stories are authentically told and not held back because of the critical race theory and the fear of the truth that's going to come out.
Yeah.
It has to begin to be the other side of those stories that are told authentically. So instead of us showing up to the meeting, I'd love to hear those stories as well. So that also needs to change within our corporate space.
And that's funny you say that, because I was thinking about how I know Netta's done a lot of education on anti-racism training. And I thought a lot about how are companies incorporating this awareness of culture and cultural sensitivity into their hiring and onboarding. So it's not just like we respond when an issue happens and there is now a victim who is likely a person of color, but how are we making this space one that is safe and protected for all people who come in, and then not just focusing on making some Black folks to lead an employee resource group, but also like getting the people who, and we're not paying them for it, but getting folks who are often creating this uncomfortable space, having them put in extra work, instead of like the folks who are often getting the brunt of it, having to put in the extra work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Also having punitive, there has to be some repercussions for, especially in the workplace. And you keep saying it's a safe space. Well, no, it really is not. And the reason it's not is because we can still look across the room and see the people that are making these infractions. So until there's a reckoning there, you cannot, and there will not be a safe space. And that's why when words are spoken and there's these claims to do X, Y, and Z, like Juneteenth or the holiday, it's not going to resonate because our lived experience is still going to be traumatic because there are people in and among that space that is bringing and causing the trauma. And that has to change.
John, go ahead. I know you had something. Thank you so much, Yolanda. That was on point. Go ahead, John.
For sure. Yeah, no, Yolanda, you're spot on. Behavioral change doesn't happen unless there's either incentive or consequence, right? Those are two mechanisms.
Absolutely.
You're starting to see incentivization through bonuses of VP level and up meeting their DEI targets. Okay, cool. But there's still no consequence if they don't hit that number, right? Maybe they don't get money. All right, cool, but nobody's getting fired, right? When I hear accountability, I want to know who gets fired if this doesn't work, right? And at the end of the day, if we're looking at exit interview data, if we're looking at employee relations complaint data, you know where your toxicity lies. And these companies are wavering with this notion of, do I get rid of the toxicity or do I add more bodies to the burning building?
Yep.
Right? And they're more comfortable with adding more bodies to the burning building than removing the toxicity. So I'm like, at some point, if nobody is facing a consequence, to Yolanda's point, I'm still in the meeting with that microaggressive, dismissive, dehumanizing manager that I just filed a complaint about, and y'all couldn't find anything through the investigation. Why? Because racism isn't illegal. Discrimination's illegal, but how hard is it to prove racial discrimination? Because now you have to prove intent. So there's still a shell, right? The dirty secret of DEI is that legal is the biggest block to DEI advancement, right? Because it's at the end of the day, this is about mitigating risk to business. And if you can't prove the risk, and even if you can, there are companies that have line item budgets to handle these EEOC cases.
Oh yeah.
Just as a matter of doing business. Because the number of payouts, The payouts are so small in conjunction to annual revenue. They're like, that's like lunch for a weekend. What are we talking about?
Yeah, I really wish I had some tea with this.
And so to John's point, you're measuring everything else. If you meet a target in terms of sales, the CEO or whoever else, they're gone. But when it comes to DEI, you're looking the other way and you're making excuses, and that person still remains, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah, and the common excuse we always tend to hear is, but that person's performing well. How do we do that? But if it's a Black person that's that isn't doing well, immediately there's no question.
You're right.
Performance.
We need a part 2 of this, Netta. We need a part 2 of this.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, this is good.
I got more receipts.
This is amazing. John, Yolanda, thank you so much for coming through, sharing incredible, and I stress incredible gems with us and our viewers. To all professionals of color, connect with us on ourdipper.com right now, by signing up and completing your profile on ourdipper.com so that we can unpack all the gems that our guest dropped today. Also, be sure to rate and review all companies that you have worked for on ourdipper.com. Sign up, be the guide to a better workplace, log in to share your voice and find your space. And thank you for joining, and we hope to see you on ourdipper.com today. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.